Create a PHP website completely from scratch. All of the source code from today's video will be available down below through the GitHub link. Before we get started, the first thing you guys need to do is make sure that you install your WAMP server. If you haven't already installed this, I have a video where I walk you through the entire process on how to install this and get it set up for PHP development. I'll leave a link up top and down below to that video. But since we already have our WAMP server set up and ready to go, we're going to navigate to our File Explorer. We're going to navigate to our C drive, go to our WAMP64 folder, and inside of our www folder, what we want to do is create a new folder. And this is going to be the folder that houses all of the files for our website. And this one I'll go ahead and title Kalman Web Design, like so. Now that's all we need to do in our File Explorer. We can minimize this, and now we can go open our code editor of choice. And today I will be using Visual Studio Code. Once you have that open, what we can do is open the folder that we just created. So we just need to once again navigate back to our WAMP64 and then go ahead and open that brand new folder that we just created. And from here, it's going to be extremely similar to creating a website using HTML and CSS. What we need to do is go ahead and start off by creating a new file here, and we're going to call this our index, just like we would if we were creating a HTML website. But here, instead of saying .html, we want to say .php. So this is going to be a PHP file. And from here, we can use the same method to generate a boilerplate that we would use when creating an HTML website. So we'll go ahead and include our exclamation mark and then just hit enter. And what you guys are going to notice is that this generates us an HTML boilerplate here, but again, this is a PHP file, so moving ahead in today's video, we can actually type in PHP code. So first, what I want to do, just to illustrate to you guys that this is successfully working, is I'm going to create an H1 element and say subscribe. And from here, what I want to do is navigate down here to my search bar, and I need to actually run the WAMP server. So I'll go ahead and click on that and click yes, and this will do its thing and start our WAMP server. Once this is successfully started, we want to go down to our caret icon, go ahead and click on that, and if everything's running successfully, this icon will be green. If it is not green and it's like an orange or a red color, you have some kind of issue. If you guys can't figure out how to resolve that, let me know down below in the comments and I will help you out. But since it's working successfully for us, we want to click on this and we want to open our local host. Once our local host is open, you're going to see a list of your projects down here, and you guys are going to notice that we can see that Kalman Web Design folder that we created earlier in the video. Go ahead and click on that, and it's going to open up our index.php page, and all I have on that page so far is subscribe. Obviously, we want more than just this for our website, so what I'm going to do is navigate back to Visual Studio Code, and just like I would in an HTML CSS website, I want to create a styles folder, and within this folder I can create a styles.css file. And since the focus of today's video is creating a PHP website, I'm going to paste in all of the styling for today's video. If you guys want to use this same styling, again, it will be available through the source code down below. And if you have any questions about anything I'm doing here, feel free to reach out through the email below or through the comments section. Now I can go back to the index.php page and I can successfully import my style sheet into this page. So just set up a link element like so, and now I can navigate to my styles.css files just like so. Next, I want to set up a folder, and this is going to be for our JavaScript file, so I'll title this folder scripts. Then I need to create a scripts.js file here, and again I can just go ahead and import this into our index.php using our script element. So I'll say src needs to be equal to /scripts and then scripts.js, and as always, I always need to include my defer attribute. Now I can create a new folder, and this is going to house all of our image files, and I'm just going to go ahead and paste in all of the images that I want to use today right here in VS Code. Next, I want to navigate to Font Awesome because I'm going to use the Font Awesome 6 CDN for my website today, so I can just navigate to this website here. This will be down below in the description for you guys, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy the link tag like so, go back to Visual Studio Code, and I can go ahead and just paste it right within my head element like so. Next, I'm also going to be using Google Fonts today, so I'll navigate to Google Fonts, and this link again will be in the description below for you guys. And the font I'm going to be using today is Montserrat. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but I'll go ahead and click on this, get font, and then I need to get the embed code here, and I can just copy all of this HTML code like so. Go back to our index.php file and just paste this right on into our head element like so. Now on our website page here within our WAMP server, you're going to see that we have our WAMP server icon as our favicon image. So what we want to do is go ahead and get rid of that and change it to our own custom image. So to do that, what we want to do is create a link element here. Our rel is going to be icon instead of style sheet, and our href is going to be equal to the image that we want to use. So we'll change this to our favicon image, and then we need to include a type attribute, and this is going to be image/x-icon like so. And again, make sure you refresh your page here, and you guys will notice that our custom favicon is now showing up on our website page here. And you guys are going to notice that our subscribe H1 has disappeared, and that's simply because our text is set to white based on our styling, but as we move forward in today's video, that will change and update successfully. In our code editor, you're going to see that everything just looks like a normal HTML website at this point, but we want to use the power and functionality that PHP offers us. So to do that, our first step is going to be to create a new folder, and this folder is going to be called include. And in this folder is where we're going to create all of the files that are going to be acting as components within our PHP website. So what I want to do is inside of this include folder here, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this head.inc.php, and this is going to be our first component that we create here today. And now don't let this .inc confuse you. This is just a standard for creating components in PHP, so that's why we're doing that, but it doesn't actually add or change any functionality of our component here. And now what we need to do is come back to our index.php, and we're going to cut all of this using Control X and go ahead and paste it within our head.php file here. So you guys can see there's nothing special about this here, but what we need is we need each page that we have to have its own custom title. So to do this, what we want to do is actually include some PHP code here. And to include PHP code, you want to start off with a less than sign, a question mark, followed by PHP, and then to close this out, you want to use a question mark followed by a greater than sign. And here we want to create a variable, and we're simply going to call this title, and our variable is created in PHP using our $sign here. And then to actually display this within our title element here on our website, what we want to do is we want to echo this. And that's all we need to do within this head.php file. Now go back to your index.php, and we're again going to specify PHP code here. And now we can use that variable that we created, and we want to say what we want it to display. So we'll make this equal to top trucks for this page. And then if you guys are used to using JavaScript, you don't always have to include semicolons when you're coding with JavaScript. But for PHP, you want to include your semicolon after each line of code or you will run into issues. And to include that head file that we just created, we can simply use include, and then we just need to tell this where we want to get our file from. So we'll go into our include folder and we want to get our head.inc.php file. And again, make sure you include your semicolons. Now, if I refresh this page over here, you guys are going to notice that the title of our page successfully changes to top trucks. So you can follow this same syntax here for each one of your pages and just simply update the name of the title for that page. So now instead of having to edit this head element on every single HTML page, you can just have one file that contains all of the information. Next, what we want to do is create a new file within our include folder, and this is going to be titled navigation.inc.php. And inside of our index.php, inside of our body element, we're going to get rid of this h1, and we're going to distinguish our PHP code again here. And we're actually going to create some space like so. And we want to once again use include, and we want to include that new file that we just created within our include folder. So we'll just include it like such and make sure that we include our semicolon. Now back in our navigation.inc.php, we want to start off with our header element followed by a nav element. Create two div elements here, just like so. Within our first div, we'll create an anchor element, and this needs to link to our index.php page. And inside of this, we want to include an image, and we simply want to navigate to our images / top - trucks logo.png. And in here, we want to create an image element where we go into our images folder and get our logo. And then we also want to include our alternative text of logo. And then we want to include a loading attribute and make this equal to lazy. Then create an h2 element where we say the name of our business, which is going to be top trucks. And inside of our second div element, we're going to create an I element for our font awesome icon with the class of fa-solid and fa-bars. And now, if we go ahead and refresh our page over here, you guys can see our navigation start coming together. Next, we're going to create a div with a class of nav-links. Create another I element with a class of fa-solid and fa-x. And underneath that, we'll create an anchor element. And here we want to link to our index.php page, and we want to go to the ID of inventory, and you guys will see how we'll set that up in a moment. In this, we just want to include the text inventory, and we'll go ahead and make sure we capitalize that. Then we want another anchor element, and here we're going to link to our contact.php, and we'll include the text contact. Now, if we refresh this and click on our icon here, you're going to notice nothing happens, and that's because we haven't included our JavaScript here yet. And for the sake of today's video, I'm just going to paste in our JavaScript code. If you guys want to see a complete guide on how to create this navigation with the JavaScript, I'll leave a link up top and down below for you guys. Now, if I refresh this page and click on this icon, you guys are going to notice that our navigation appears, and I can also close out of the navigation. Next, we'll go back to our index.php, and I want to stress that for everything you do in PHP, make sure you include notes for yourself because it can get confusing really fast. And the next section we want to create is going to be our hero image along with the text. So here we'll start off with a section element with a class of hero-container. Create a div with a class of hero-text. Create an h1 that says top trucks, create an H2 and paste our text here. Now if we refresh, you guys are going to be able to see our hero image followed by the text that we created. But we also want to include an anchor element, and inside of this anchor we want to link to our contact.php, and then we also want to include a button inside of this that says contact us, like so. And now if we refresh, you guys are going to see we have our text along with our button. Now we can move on to our truck inventory section. So I'll create a comment that says truck inventory. We want to start off with an H2 element with a class of inventory dash header and an ID of inventory. So now you guys are going to see where that inventory ID came in handy, because we're linking directly to our inventory instead of just our home page here. So if we go back to our navigation, you guys can see that it's going to use our inventory ID that we just created to link to that specific part of the page. We want to make sure we include our text truck inventory, create a div with a class of trucks dash grid. Inside of this, we'll create a div with the class truck. Inside of this, we'll create an image element, and we want to link to an image of our first truck, followed by the alternative text of truck 1. Create another div, and inside of this, we'll create an H2 element and say truck 1. Create a paragraph element that says price, and we'll just enter $1 for now, followed by another paragraph tag, and this is going to be followed by another paragraph tag that says mileage, and we'll just say 1 for now. And then we also want to include miles at the end. Then we also want to create an anchor element that navigates to our contact.php and include a button with the text learn more here. Now if we refresh, you guys are going to see that the first item in our grid is successfully displaying here, along with our image, the name, the price, the mileage, and the learn more button. But since we're using PHP, we can do this a lot more effectively. So what we're going to do is navigate to our include folder, create a new file called trucks.inc.php, and inside of this we're going to specify that this is going to be PHP, and since we're only including PHP on this page, we don't need the closing section of this. Now we'll create a variable called truck inventory, and what we're going to do is make this equal to an array that stores all of our product information. So to create an array in PHP, you simply type array followed by parentheses, and then we also want to include our semicolon at the end. And this is going to be a multi-dimensional array, meaning we're going to create another array here, and this array is going to store all the information for our first truck. For every value, I'm going to make it a string for now, and this first value here is going to be the ID of that specific truck or product, possibly in your instance. And then we need to separate each one of these values with a comma. And our second value is going to be the name of the first truck, followed by the price, followed by the mileage, and lastly, we want to include our image here as well. So we'll go into our folder and get the first image. And then to separate each one of our arrays here, we also want to include a comma at the end. And now that you guys understand what's going on here, I'll include the rest of the items. So now you guys can see that we have 4 different items within our array here. And what I want to point out is at the end of our last item here is you don't want to include a comma, but between each one here we want to make sure we include those commas. Now we can navigate to our index.php file, and within our trucks grid what we want to do is give ourselves some space here, and what we need to do is say that we're going to be using PHP code here, so we'll declare that here. And the first thing we need to do is include that array that we just created. So we need to go into our include folder and get our trucks.include.php. Make sure you include your semicolon. And now we want to use our PHP for each loop. And what we need to do is say what we want to loop through here, and that's going to be our truck inventory array, and then we need to say as, and then this can be named anything that you guys want, but in our case we're going to call it truck. So this is going to represent our entire array, and this is going to represent each item that we're looping through in our array. After that, we want to create our curly braces, and what we need to do is make sure that we echo out this information, and we'll include our quotation marks here. And keep in mind that when you're using quotation marks, you cannot use double quotation marks inside of double quotation marks. So what I mean by that is I cannot come in here and create, for example, an H2 element and then create a class in here and use double quotation marks, or it's going to cause an issue, as you guys can see here. If I'm using double quotation marks here, I have to make these single quotation marks or it will not work successfully. So you guys are going to notice that I made that change down below here. I have all single quotation marks now. So what I'm going to do is get rid of this H2 element, cut this using Control X, and I'm simply going to paste it within this echo statement here like so. And then at the end, you want to make sure you include your semicolon like so. And I'm going to go ahead and indent this one level just like that. And now in this first div, what I need to do is create a custom ID for each element from our array. So I'll say data-id equals, and we want to include our single quotation marks. And then inside of that, include our curly braces. And we want to reference our truck variable here. And again, this is representing each item within our array. And we want to use the first value in each of our arrays here. So basically, this is going to get the first value from each one of our arrays. So we'll get 1, 2, 3, and 4 respectively from each one of our arrays within our truck inventory. And now I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this, and I want to dynamically get each one of our image elements. So here, instead of getting directly our image, what we want to do is get each one, and we just need to specify what value from our array we want to get. And in this case, we want to get the last one, which is going to be 4, and then we also want to get the alternative text, which is going to be the same as the description, and this is going to be 1. And then we also want to make sure that we have our loading attribute equal to lazy for each one of these images. Now instead of truck1, we'll get rid of that, change this to 1 for the title of each item, change our price here from $1. This is going to be 2. And we also want to include our $sign here like so. And you guys are going to notice that causes an issue. To get rid of that, we want to include a slash just like so. And then we also want to change our mileage based on our array. And here we're going to put 3. And keep in mind what's going on here, if you guys are confused, is that arrays are 0 indexed. So to get the first value from our array, we want to use 0, and then so on. We continue counting down the list. Now, if we go ahead and refresh our page, you're going to see that all of our items are dynamically rendered onto our page because we're pulling all of the information from our array using this built-in for each loop in PHP. Now underneath that, we want to go ahead and create our footers, starting off with our footer element, create a div, and then inside of this, we'll create another div, create an anchor element that links to our index.php. And here we want to include an H2 element that says top trucks. Underneath that div, we'll create one more, create an H2 element that says site map, create an anchor that links to our index.php again, and we'll include the text home, create another anchor element that links to our contact.php. We'll include the text contact, and just to divide this up nicely, we'll go ahead and create an HR element, and let's refresh our page and look at how it's looking so far so you guys can see we're just creating a basic footer with a little site map. Now underneath this, we'll create another div and create an H3. And inside of this H3, we'll just include our text for our copyright information. And now you guys can see we have our basic footer set up. But again, we want this to be reusable. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut all of this information out using Control X. We're going to distinguish our PHP code here, like so. And then we simply want to include, but we haven't created our include file yet. So what we'll do is create that file. We're going to call it footer.inc.php. Go ahead and paste in that footer like so. Now we can go back to our index.php and successfully get that footer from our include folder, just like so. Now if we refresh, you guys will see that footer still successfully displays. So what we're going to go ahead and do now is we're going to go ahead and copy this index.php page, paste it, and what we're going to do is rename this to template.php. And what we want to do is go through here, get rid of our hero section, like so, delete that. Get rid of our truck inventory, so we'll go ahead and delete that. And here we're just going to have all the stuff that is going to be universal on every single page on this website. And then we'll change our title here to change this. So basically what this template page is it's a template that we can reuse over and over again for every single PHP page that we create. And what I mean by this is we can go ahead and just copy this and then paste it. And now I can rename this to our contact.php page. And this gives us a great starting point for our contact PHP because we already have our head element and all of the necessary information, followed by our navigation and our footer. So now if I go in here, go ahead and click on this, navigate to the contact page, you guys are going to see that we have all the standards set up for each page ready to go. So to get this page started, I'm going to change the title to contact, and underneath our navigation, this is going to be our contact info. And we want to start off with an H1 that says contact us, followed by an H2 element with a class of contact description, and we'll go ahead and paste in our text here. Then we'll create a div with a class of contact dash container, create one more div with a class of contact dash info, create an H2 that says contact info. And now if we refresh this, you guys are going to slowly start seeing it come together. Underneath contact info, we'll create a div, create an icon with a class fa-solid and fa-phone. Underneath our icon, we'll create a paragraph element and say phone, then colon, and just include our phone number. And then this div, we're going to copy and paste it 2 times like so. Change this to fa envelope, include our email here, change this to fa-location-dot, and replace this with our location. Now if we go ahead and refresh, you can see contact info followed by our phone, email, and location. And you guys are going to see that our title information is still hidden, and that's because I need to add a class to our body. So this class needs to be equal to contact. And now if I refresh the page, you guys are going to see that contact us and reach out to find out more is now visible. Next, what we're going to do is create a new file in our include folder, and this is going to be our contact form, and we'll say .inc.php. Now back in our contact.php page, underneath our contact info div is where we're going to include this form. So we need to say that we're going to be using PHP again, and then we simply want to use include, and then we want to include that new file that we just created of contact form, just like so. Now in our contact form.php, what we need to do is start creating our form. So we'll start off with a div element, create a form element, and for our action we're going to leave it blank for now, but we're going to include a method and make that equal to post, create an H2 that says reach out, create a label element that's going to be for our first name, and we'll just say first name here, followed by a span element with the class of error, followed by an input element where our type is text, our ID is equal to our first name, and our name is also going to be equal to first name. Now we're simply going to copy and paste these 3 lines right below, and now we're going to change all of this to last name instead of first name, and then first name here is our text needs to also be changed to last. Paste this one more time, and all of this we want to select it again and change this to email, and then change our first name text to email. Go ahead and paste it one more time, and instead of an input here, we want this to be a text area like so, and we need to make sure that we also have our closing tag for our text area. And then here we want to make sure we change all of this to message, and then first name also needs to be message like so. At the bottom we'll create a button, and we'll need to create a type attribute and make that equal to submit, and we'll add the text submit here. Now if we refresh this page, you guys are going to see that we have a form successfully showing up on our page now. Now what we need to do is use PHP to actually validate this form. So the first thing we need to do is go above where we created our form and say that we're going to be using PHP code up here now. And the first thing we want to do is turn our error reporting on using error reporting and say e_all, so it will successfully display any errors that we have. And then we want to use any_set to display errors, and we want to turn this one on as well. Now when somebody puts in wrong information or doesn't fill out a field here and click submit, we want to display an error. So to do this, we want to create error value variables. So we're going to need a first name error, and instead of creating these all individually, we'll just create them all in a row. So we'll also need a last name error variable, an email error variable, and a message error variable. And all of these we just want to set to empty strings for now. And inside of our spans is where we want to display these error variables if they don't fill out something correctly. So for now, even though we don't have the functionality of that setup yet, what we want to do is distinguish PHP code with inside of our span elements here, just like I'm doing. And what we want to do is echo the error. And for our first name, we want to echo the first name error variable. And for the rest of these, we can just copy this and paste it in. So for our last name, we want to echo the last name error. For our email, we want to echo the email error variable. And for our message, we want to echo out the message error. Next, we need to create our form variables. And this is where we're going to create variables to grab all of the information that our user inputs here. So this is going to be similar to what we just did, but this time it's just going to be first name followed by last name followed by our email and our message. And again, we're just going to make these equal to empty strings for now. So basically what we're doing here is we're just initializing our variables here as empty strings. And then we want to display something after our user submits the form. So what we're going to do is create a variable called form display, and this is going to be displayed once the user submits the form. We're going to make this equal to an empty string. Next, we need to create a variable to test if our validation passes. So we'll call this our validation pass variable, and we'll make this equal to the Boolean value of true. Next, we're going to create a function using our function keyword, and this is going to be called test_input. And what this function is going to do is it's going to clean up any values that the user inputs. And this function is going to have a parameter of data. And the first thing we want to do is take our data We want to trim it to get rid of any extra spaces or anything. So we'll use trim, and then all we need to do is pass in our data, and trim is just a built-in method in PHP. And we're just going to copy and paste this below and change trim to strip slashes. Then we'll paste it one more time. We want to make sure that we get rid of any HTML special characters so nobody can hack us or send in vicious information through our forms. And here we just want to return our data. Now that we have everything set up, we're going to actually get into our form validation. So to start off, we're going to create an if statement, and inside of this we want to include the following code to see if our server method is post. So here we'll include a $_server followed by brackets, quotation marks, and then we want to see what the request method is, and we want to see if that is equal to post. And in our case, we have our method down here set to post, so this would be true. So if it is post, which it is, what we need to do is create another if statement, and we need to see if this first input value is empty. So what we want to do is use our empty method, and we want to use $_post to get our fname input. So what we're doing here is we're selecting whatever is in this input based on the name attribute. So that's why we're using fname, because we're using this to get whatever the user enters in this input here. So if this is empty, what we need to do is display our fname error. So this will simply say first name is required. And then since this is empty, we want to change our validation pass variable to false because it's not going to pass our form validation. So what I need to do down here now is I need to change the action of this form. And obviously we have all of our PHP form validation on the same page. So we need to run this code up here that we just created. So to do this is we want to include PHP code within our action here, and we want to echo use HTML special characters just to add an extra layer of security, and we want to use our server again, but inside of our square brackets we want to say PHP_self. And what this is going to do is our action is going to be tied to the PHP code on this particular page. That's why we're using PHP self here. And then we also want to navigate to our target ID. So we'll say #target here, and keep in mind we haven't created this yet, but we will in a second. So now if I go ahead and refresh my page here and I don't enter anything for the first name, but I go ahead and click submit, you're going to see that first name is required renders onto the page because this input is empty, and that's what we're checking for right here. But if there is something inside of this input, what we need to do is create an else statement, and we need to use our fname variable, and we need to use our test input to further clean up whatever the user entered. So what we can do is we can use this code here again to get that value and just paste it right here. So what will happen is if something is entered here, like let's say I enter my name Tom, it's going to take this value here, test if it's empty or not, but since this is not empty, it's going to run this code. So it's going to run Tom or whatever else the user might enter through our test input function to make sure nothing vicious is coming into our form, and it cleans up any excess like any spaces or anything weird that somebody might enter. So what we can do now is simply copy this, paste it down below, and instead of using fname here is we can just go ahead and change all of these to last name instead. And then here we want this obviously to say last name is required. Now we'll go ahead and paste it again for our email. So once again, we'll go ahead and change all of these out to email. Here we're going to go ahead and say email is required. But for our email, we also need to see if this is actually a legitimate email or not. So what we need to do is create an else if here. And inside of our else if, what we want to do is include the not sign, which is going to be an exclamation mark. And we need to use our filter var method, get the value using $_post of our email input, and we need to see if this is a legitimate email or not. So we'll use filter _ validate, and then we want to say email. So this is basically going to check if our inputted value for email here is a legitimate email or not. And what we can do to make this quicker is go ahead and copy this, paste it down below. And instead of email is required, we want to say enter a valid email. And then we can just leave validation pass as false. So now we're going to go back to our contact.php, and I'm going to not enter anything for any of these fields and go ahead and hit submit. You guys are going to say it says first name is required, last name is required, and email is required. But if I enter something invalid here in the email box, because this is obviously not a legitimate email, hit submit, it's going to say enter a valid email. Now what we need to do is copy this code and paste it down here. And this is all just going to get changed out to message this time. So we'll just say message, and then we want to say message is required. Now what you guys are going to notice over here is, let's say I go ahead and put my first name here and click submit. Even though these three fields down here are incorrect, it should keep the value from the first field that I entered. So to do that, what we're going to do is go back down to our form, and for each input element, what we want to do is create a value attribute like so. And we want to make this equal to PHP code using our PHP declaration here. And we need to echo out our variables. So for this one, we'll go ahead and echo our first name variable, and I need to make sure I put the $sign here. So now if I go over here and refresh, I'll go ahead and hit cancel, just go back to your home page and then go back to the contact to refresh it. Let's say I enter my first name of Tom and go ahead and click submit. You guys are going to see that even though these last three inputs are incorrect, it keeps the value of this first input. So if I entered this one correctly, let's say, I don't have to go back and re-input it again. So what this does is it just makes the user experience much better. So instead of having to redo everything, you only redo the portions that you messed up or didn't include correctly. So what we're going to go ahead and do is just copy and paste these value attributes for each input and also for our text area down below. And all I need to do is just change these out. So for our last name, we'll change this to last name. For our email, we'll change this to email. And for our message, we'll just go ahead and again change this to message. So now if I go back over here, I need to go ahead and refresh again. And then you might need to navigate to your home and go back to your contact page again. Let's say I enter my first name, I enter a last name, and I also enter an email address here and go ahead and click submit, but don't include anything for the message. You guys will see it keeps these first three input values here and just says message is required. Now that we have everything successfully validated, what we need to do is go down here underneath our last else statement. And what we need to do is set up another if statement, and we want to check if our validation passes. So we're going to use our validation pass variable here, and if everything passes successfully, this will evaluate to true and run the code that we're about to include here. So what we want to do is copy all of these form variables here, and if our validation passes, the first thing we want to do is go ahead and clear out each one of our input fields. So now if we refresh this page again and I enter everything correctly this time, what it will do is it will remove all of these input fields for security purposes once you hit submit. So since I have everything entered correctly, once I click submit, you guys will see it clears out those input fields. Now that we have the validation and the form itself set up, what we want to do when somebody successfully submits this form is we want to send it to a Gmail address of our choice. So the first thing we're going to need to do to get that to work is we're going to need to install something called Composer. Go to getcomposer.org, and Composer is basically a package manager, but for PHP. So what we can do is navigate to download, and then what we need to do is download and run the composer-setup.exe. Once that downloads, go ahead and open it up. Say install for all users. Developer mode, we're not going to select that because we don't need it. And then here we want to select the PHP version that we're using with our WAMP server. If you guys don't know what version you are currently using, go down to your WAMP server, and what you want to do is go right here to where it says PHP, and it will say the version right here. And remember, before you can install Composer, you need to have PHP installed on your computer. But with our WAMP server installation, it already has that installed for us. So since we're using 8.3.6, that's where we want to go ahead and install it to. So we'll go ahead and hit next. And once we get here, if you have a proxy server, you can go ahead and enter it here. But in our case, we don't need to worry about that. So we'll click next, and now we can just hit install. And once this installs successfully, it'll say that it's completing Composer setup, and you can go ahead and click finish. Now what you need to do is go ahead and restart your computer at this point. Now that we installed Composer and restarted our computer, open up your code editor again, and also you want to open your WAMP server again. Once WAMP server is successfully started again, go ahead and open your locally hosted project. And again, we're working out of Kalman Web Design, so we'll open this one specifically. And then to make sure that Composer is successfully installed, what we want to do is open a terminal in our code editor, create a command prompt here, and simply say Composer. And if Composer is installed, what it will do is it will show you all of the Composer installation here, and it will show you the version that you also have installed. After that, we can go ahead and close out of this command prompt. What we need to do now is we need to install something called PHP Mailer to successfully send an email to our Gmail account of choice. And in our instance today, I'm going to send it to kalmanwebdesign@gmail.com. So to get this all set up, what we need to do is create a composer.json file so we can actually install our dependencies. So we're going to again open our terminal, and what we want to do is open a command prompt, and we want to run the code composer init to create our composer.json. For this, we're just going to go ahead and hit enter. We really need to put an email or anything special. I guess it's going to force me to put an email here, so I'll go ahead and do so. Use kalmanwebdesign@gmail.com. Here it wants to force me to do this as well, so if it does this to you guys, just enter something as well. Go ahead and hit enter through the rest of this, and then it says, would you like to define your dependencies? I'm just going to leave that blank for now. Search for a package. I'm not going to worry about any of this. Just go ahead and press N to skip, and then I want to confirm my generation with Y. And now you guys can see that my composer.json file has been successfully created. Now to install our dependencies, what we need to do is I'm going to shrink this, make this just a little bit bigger so we can see what's going on. So to install, what we need to do is say composer followed by require, and we need to say PHP mailer / PHP mailer. Go ahead and hit enter from there, and that will install our PHP mailer dependency, as you guys can see here. it will require our PHP mailer installation here, and it will give us the version here as well. So what we can do now is go back to our contact form.php file. We can close out of our terminal and back up here after our test input function. So basically before our form validation is we want to include our PHP mailer here. And to do this, we want to say use PHP mailer slash PHP mailer slash PHP mailer one more time. Then we want to copy this line and paste it down below. And instead of having PHP mailer at the end, we want to say exception so we can log any errors. You guys can see it's giving us that underline because we haven't used it yet. So now within our if statement, checking if our validation successfully passed, and before we clear out our input fields, what I want to do is create a mail variable, make this equal to new PHP mailer, and then inside of these parentheses, I want to say true. Now I need to create a try catch, so I'll go ahead and create that now. And here is where we're going to configure our server settings for our PHP mailer. So the first thing I need to do is use my mail variable, and I want to set the SMTP debug equal to 0. And then here I'm going to go ahead and copy this, paste it down below, and instead of saying SMTP debug, I want to say is SMTP because we're going to be using an SMTP on Gmail to go ahead and send this email. Paste that again one more time. So I'll go ahead and copy this section here, go ahead and paste it here. And now instead of is SMTP, I want to specify my host. And your host for Gmail is going to be smtp.gmail.com. I'm going to paste this one more time, and this needs to be SMTP auth for authorization, and we need to set this equal to true. I'm going to paste this again, and this needs to be our username to log into our Gmail account. And for our username, it's going to be my email, kalmanwebdesign@gmail.com, or whatever username you guys want to use for this today. And next, we're going to need to set up our password here, and then username actually needs to be capitalized, so I'll go ahead and change that. And our password is going to be a little bit tricky here, so we'll leave this blank for now. What we need to do now is navigate into our Google account. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Google account here, go ahead and sign into my Google account real quick. If I haven't already, it looks like I'm already signed in. Once I'm signed into my account, I want to go to security, and what I need to do to make sure that this works is first, I need to make sure that two-step verification is on. If you guys haven't enabled this already, go through the process of setting up your two-step verification for your Google account and make sure that all your recovery phone, recovery email is set up and ready to go, and you don't have any errors at all here. Once you have all of that set up, go to two-step verification. From here, we want to log into the account again, so I'll go ahead and do that really quick. And once you guys get into two-step verification, you want to go down to where it says app passwords. This is going to be all the way down at the bottom. You guys can see I already have one created, but in your instance, you probably don't have any yet. So what we're going to do is go ahead and click on this, and you guys can see that I already have one created that I used today just to test out this project. What I'm going to do is create a new one, and I'm going to go ahead and call this Kalman Web Design and go ahead and create it. And you're going to see that it gives us a password here, and don't try and rip off my password because I'm immediately going to delete this after I'm done filming this video. So please don't try and rip me off here because you're not going to get anywhere. Make sure that you keep this password securely somewhere, because once you hit done, you're not going to be able to come back and view this password again. You'll have to come back and create a new app from scratch if you don't have this password either remembered or written down somewhere. Once you have that written down, go ahead and click done. Now we can navigate out of Google, go back to our code editor, and instead of having a blank password, what we want to do is enter the password that Google just gave us right here as our app password. Now we can go ahead and continue. So we'll use our mail variable, and we want to make sure that this is secure. So we'll use SMTP secure, make this equal to PHP mailer again, followed by 2 colons, and we want to say encryption start TLS. And then for now, we're just going to use our default port. So we'll use our mail variable again, specify our port, make this equal to 587. And now we're going to get into the recipients portion of this. So we need to use our mail variable again. And here we're going to use our set from method. I'm going to create the from email address here. And this is simply going to be a generic email address. So I'll use toptrucks@info.com. And I'll say this is from Top Trucks. Now I need to use the mail variable one more time. I want to add an address, and this is where the email is going to be sent to. And I simply want to use my business email of kalmanwebdesign@gmail.com. And then we'll just simply say Kalman Web Design here. Now we need to create the content of what is actually going to be sent and set up the layout. So I'll use mail, and we want to send an HTML formatted email. So we'll say is HTML, and we want to set that to true. Now we can go ahead and dynamically set our subject line here using our mail variable followed by subject. We want this to be equal to Top Truck form submission. And now we can set the body of what is going to be in this email. And we're actually going to set this up in an HTML format. So we'll just go ahead and start creating our HTML elements like we're creating an HTML page. And what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to paste in my head element followed by a title, followed by some basic styling, how we want to style this email. You guys can change this to whatever you want. Now we're going to set up our body element. We're going to create a div with a class equal to submission, create an H3 that says form submission, create another div element, create a P element here, and we're going to go ahead and say first name, and we're going to go ahead and copy this paragraph element, paste it right in here, and here we can dynamically display the information that is entered in the form using our variables. So we're going to use our fname variable here, which is going to be our first name input field. And now we can just go ahead and copy and paste this 3 more times. So we'll do that like so. Change this second one to last name, change this third one to email, and we can just change our variable names as we go through here, and change our last one simply to message, and change our variable to our message variable. Now we need to make sure that we include our semicolon at the end of this. And then the last thing we need to do here is go ahead and successfully send this information to our email. So we'll just use our send method here. Now after this is sent, what we want to do is change what our form display variable is going to display onto our page. So all we need to do here is make this simply equal to a div element with some information. So we'll create a div. This div is going to have a class equal to submission and an ID equal to target. Inside of this, we'll create an H3 element. And here we just want to say your message was sent and make sure we close out our element. Now we need to set up our catch to catch any errors that we might have. So we'll use our exception followed by our event here. And we're just going to go ahead and copy this from up here. And we want to change our form display to this code here. But instead of saying your message was sent, we want to say message could not be sent, try again, or call us directly. And then we want to make sure we close this off with our semicolon. Now we need to move on to the testing portion of this. So what we'll do is go back to our contact form, go ahead and make sure we reset this or refresh it. And I'm going to go ahead and put in some dummy data here. Go ahead and include an email address, and I'll just say hi. Go ahead and submit. And you guys are going to see that there's an error displaying here, and this error is going to be pretty simple to fix. You guys can see over here that instead of putting body with a capital B, I accidentally put a lowercase. You guys are gonna notice that I'm having another error, and it's gonna be because up here, I forgot to include my auto load PHP file. So what I need to do is require my vendor /autoload.php file. And if you guys need to get in and change this file at any point, you shouldn't have to at this point. It's gonna be located in your vendor and right here at autoload.php. Go down below our form, and what we're gonna do is create some PHP code here, just like so. And here we want to go ahead and echo our form display variable, just like this. So we'll go ahead and refresh this. So now you guys can see everything is working correctly. I'm gonna go ahead and enter some dummy data again one more time, just to prove to you guys that this is successfully working. And I'm gonna go ahead and hit submit. Now you guys can see that when we submit it successfully, it scrolls us down so we can see your message was sent, and inside of our Gmail, you guys can see that it is popping up correctly. So now you guys have a perfect and secure way to receive emails when somebody fills out your online forms. With that being said, we have a complete and beautiful website developed from scratch with PHP. I hope this video helped out. If you guys have any questions or run into any issues, reach out to me at kalmanwebdesign@gmail.com, or go down in the comments and let me know, and I will help you guys out completely for free. Thanks for watching. I hope this helped out.